Welcome back to another edition of Zero Blog 30. Guess who's out again, Kate, today?
Nick? Could it be Nick?
That's
He's
not
always
Nick.
here.
Nick is
No?
present for duty. He's
I'm
accounted
here.
for. He's here. Nick is here. It's Cons. Once again, Cons is out of pocket. Who would have
Go
thought?
get Ebony. Bring her in.
Yeah, we need to get Ebony in. But in all seriousness, he's on his bachelor's party. So we are excited for him to go. He's going to Scottsdale, doing a very officer type of trip and going golfing with the other fellas. No ladies invited.
No She-Man Woman
Mhm.
Haters Club.
Mhm.
He-Man Woman. That's also there's some big golf tournament out there this weekend, isn't there?
Yeah, the garbage golf tournament.
I love the
waste
garbage golf
management tour.
tournament.
Mhm.
Waste management. Yeah, we call it the garbage golf is out there this weekend, right?
Yeah.
The trash.
I don't think
clubs.
he's going to that though.
Yeah, but there's still going to be an air of
Yeah,
like
there'll
so
be that
many.
kind of Babadook vibe around Scottsdale.
I'm just saying Scottsdale is going to be a sea of Captain Conses because
That's
of
the
this.
difference between our bachelor parties or your bachelorette. Ours would have more of a Babadook vibe, and Cons is going to have a grown-up drinking wine kind of vibe.
My bachelorette party was down the Jersey Shore during my family
Of course
vacation
it was. Yeah.
in Seattle City, and
No, you
we-
doubled it up during family vacation.
during
Love
family
that.
vacation. And so we rolled like 50 people deep. All my aunts and uncles came out. We took over this bar. There's this huge rectangle bar with like 100 bar stools around it. And I was so fucked up. I remember running around and knocking every single bar stool over. And the staff being like, well, it's her bachelorette party. Let her go. You know, like she's allowed. And I was like, yeah. Anyway, it was one of the best nights of my
But
life.
that's the kind of moment now. I wish I had that recorded so that I could make you watch it back because you would cringe so bad at your behavior. Like Katie drunk, having a great time. Katie drunk, looking back at Katie drunk, you're always like, oh, I can't believe I did that.
This bar was so look, Lacosta, rest in peace. Is last year was last year, but no, it was okay that I did it there. I feel like I feel good about it. But it was I mean, I will say this, it was low key. Everybody was in jeans and like flip-flops and whatever. My aunts and uncles are there. I feel like people try and go too fancy sometimes. Be a dirtbag. I smoked 1 million cigarettes. I had a great time. Con smokes.
You'll remember it forever. Yeah,
Oh.
Con's gonna rip some heaters for sure. He'll go out there, rip some heaters, probably stop at a Wawa, get some horseradish meatball subs. Like it'll be the same thing.
I would say my guess is he's going to smoke 7 cigars right down to the nub, and he's
Do
going
you
to come
like
back.
cigars? I think that's
No.
probably the most military guy thing that I don't like. I don't like cigars. It
I
just makes you
wish I
feel
did.
gross for fucking hours after.
I wish I did. A lot of my uncles smoke cigars, and I love the smell of it. I love it. Down on the beach when I'm walking in the morning, I smell them smoking their cigars like the crack of the. It's a delight.
I don't mind cigar taste like in the moment. It's how your mouth tastes hours after and then the next morning. No matter how long you brush your teeth, no matter how much mouthwash you use, it just sticks around in your pores, and I fucking hate it.
That's why I smoked cigarettes. No
Yeah,
fuss, no
exactly
muss.
right.
I
Way
couldn't even
classier.
tell. Way
Yeah,
classier. No
way
yellow teeth
classier.
here.
Nope, none at all. But we do have 5 rounds of the magazine. We have a huge show. This is probably the first time we've ever had 3 interviews in one show. Would you say?
Move aside, 2 girls, 1 cup. We got 3 interviews, 1 show.
Whoa. That was actually pretty good off the top of the dome, Kate.
Thank you.
Where did you watch 2 Girls, 1 Cup the first time?
Of course, the Marine Corps. Of course.
Mhm.
Is that even a question?
Yeah. Did you watch the Pain Olympics too?
I know there's 3 videos that would constantly get sent to me, like never gonna give. I would get rickrolled by them. Like the
Mhm.
initial thumbnail would be something
Yeah.
else, like a puppy, and you
Mhm.
click on it. One was the song "You Spin Me Right Round,
Mhm.
Baby," and it was just a penis spinning like a helicopter.
There's one that we found on TikTok that was a remix for that, but it was the Christian version, and they're singing it at church like, "You spin me right now, Jesus, right now, like
Yeah.
a record, Jesus."
Right. So there was that one.
Yeah.
The other one was the guy who puts the glass up his butthole.
Oh yeah.
And then he crushes it, and then he poops out the glass.
and blood.
that-
Yeah.
That was a huge one. And then third was 2 Girls, 1 Cup. Also,
Where did you stand on cake farts?
cake farts? Was this
You
the
know-
lady who sat on the cakes?
Yeah, I just farted.
Yeah.
on it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was a fan, of course.
That's
And
art.
also,
I mean, I
I
don't
would-
really think that's gross. I think that's art.
the 4th thing, and this was, I feel like people don't talk about, there's no like blockbuster porns that really come out anymore these days. The industry has
True.
changed. It's OnlyFans.
There's no Brianna Loves Jenna anymore.
What pirates? Do you remember when it was like Pirates of the Caribbean? But
That's one of the biggest Barstool stories ever was weird haircut. Or no, it was pirate porn. Like the pirate porn guy where they downloaded it in the office in Milton. And it like they got strikes from because you remember if you used to do torrenting, you could get a strike and they would shut off your internet.
Yeah.
Well, that happened at Barstool, and
it was with the movie Pirates.
Simon.
Porn?
Yeah.
Pirate
Simon downloaded all this pirate porn, and Dave brought him in. You got to watch it. Yeah, if you haven't seen it, it's fucking hilarious. Dave brings him in, Pirate Simon, into the office and questions him, and eventually he admits to it. Like, yeah, I was downloading pirate porn in the office.
Well, I'm talking about there was one feature film called.
Oh yeah,
Pirates.
I know. It's that one. Yeah.
Oh wow. Yeah. Okay.
Everybody wanted to see that. That was big shit.
Those were the big ones. Yes. So 3 interviews, huh?
Yeah, we got 5 rounds of the magazine. Round number 1, school circle on the mayor. He's about to do a hip pocket class on how ice fishing can lead to a little old-fashioned hooking. We ain't talking fishing, folks. We're talking prostitutes out there on the ice.
Guess you could say ice fishing is a gateway hole.
That is exactly right, Kate. Round number 2, a museum guard went full-blown junior enlisted and colored the eyes of a $1 million painting because he was bored.
Can you blame him?
No, I can't. And there's one aspect of this story that just makes my heart swell. It just makes me so happy. Round number 3, Dan Lamothe from the Washington Post has been knee deep in documents over the last few weeks. He's pieced together all the puzzle parts, and now we're going to find out what actually happened the last few days in Afghanistan, and you're going to be infuriated, Catherine.
Yep.
Round number 4.
Not surprised, though.
Nope, not surprised at all. Round number 4, there's a situation on the border. It's long and largely needless, and it's causing the death of far too many troops. The Army Times has been all over the story, led by Davis Winkie, who's going to join us for this round to tell us what's going on there. That one's also going to make you mad. And finally, round number 5, we bring in Terrell Starr. He's a foreign policy reporter and a resident of Ukraine, and he's going to join us to break the Ukraine-Russia conflict down Barney style. There's a lot of things going on there that I had no idea about. And because I view everything through an American lens, just like most Americans do, because that's what we're taught to do from an early age.
I like that we had to tell him, Terrell, we've been explaining it to our listeners, but without knowing what we were talking about. Can you,
we've been doing a very poor job.
Can you untangle what we've done, please?
Can you come in and help us out so we're not just reading this report verbatim and being like, this is the story, this is what's going on. You're going to really enjoy hearing from him. And you got to go to social media, or you got to be watching on the YouTube channel. If you're not watching on the YouTube channel right now, what are you doing? Go to YouTube. It's a much better show on YouTube, I feel.
And you know what? You never know what you're going to get. You hear us, you can't see what we're doing. Both of us had our nipples on social media yesterday.
That's exactly right.
You might see some nipple if you watch on YouTube. So like and subscribe.
You're not going to see YouTube nipples because that would get us banned. So we're not going to be doing that. Good teaser, okay. But we're actually not. If you're a YouTube god listening, we're not doing that. Kate's wrong. But we are going to be crushing some piggyback rye craft cocktails because they are delicious. The whiskey distillers at Whistle Pig have cut loose on these cans, folks. This is piggyback barrel-aged craft cocktail in a can. It's so much better than a seltzer. It's crisp. It's refreshing. But it's also super bold and flavorful. I don't think there's anything like this out there that's 8% alcohol by volume. They come directly to your door. If you go to piggybackcraftcocktail.com, you're going to be able to get from shipped straight to your spot. They have fresh ginger, lime, blackberry lemon fizz, session citrus mint, and so many more things. If you want to order their whiskey, it's fantastic. Even the piggyback, I think it's the entry level is the piggyback, and it is still very, very good. I enjoy it, drink it quite often. So you should too by going to piggybackcraftcocktail.com for more info, and you can grab a box in select stores whenever you see them as well. Okay, we want to get back into Nipplegate last night. Sometimes when I see your Instagram story refresh at like, let's say past 7 o'clock, it's either going to be one of two things. We're going to either be talking baby monitor pictures is what we're going to see.
For sure. Yeah.
We're going to see some kind of canned vegetable, whether that be beets or peas.
It was carrots yesterday.
And also you had an abomination to the Lord spaghetti canned meal
Chef
that you
Boyardee
also put fucking hot sauce in.
Chef Boyardee trumps SpaghettiOs so hard. Chef Boyardee, specifically spaghetti and meatballs. Everybody goes to the ravioli for some reason. That's dog food. No, you're all sleeping on Chef Boyardee's spaghetti and meatballs. It is so good. It's so filling. Put a little hot sauce on it. Get a piece of bread. Dip it in there. It's
I
nice and
know
saucy.
it shouldn't. I don't know what it is about spaghetti and meatballs. To me, that is like, it's just straight
The
up
noodles are fat and soft.
poverty.
They just
Right, Nick? I mean, Chef Boyardee, as an Italian guy, imagine what Super Nonna would think if you said Kate was eating SpaghettiOs.
She'd say it's an abomination to the Lord.
Exactly right.
And she'd be way
their own.
like very angry.
But that's not the major concern about what happened yesterday on Kate's Instagram. We had a little bit of Nipplegate.
Had a little bit of Nipplegate. So I had gotten out of the shower and was in my robe. So I really didn't have anything on underneath it. And while I had seen Adidas had posted a tweet yesterday. They have a new line of sports bras, like 40 different sports bras for any shape and size of titty.
Imagine
long
Kate,
boots,
you're one of
short
the ladies
boots.
that it doesn't fit. Like they're
Right?
like, oh, we got 42 different types of tits. We got all kinds of sports bras for those tits. And you go in and you got tit size 43.
Right.
And you're like, none of these are going to work for these fucking things.
That would
These
be
ham hocks are swinging around and not going to fit in a damn sports bra.
it would be
anywhere.
devastating.
Yeah.
But Adidas tweeted out about it, and to tweet it, they shared it was like the Brady Bunch squares with all the Bradys, except it was tits. And just barreled nipples out titties.
Oh, yeah.
And I liked it was normal women's tits, not the perfect ones that you see on Real Housewives. God bless Teresa Giudice, great tits.
These are not any these. It wasn't 42 sets of like Cindy Crawford titties.
Right. It was all sorts. It was your mom's titties, essentially, which are now my titties, you know? So I was like, oh, hey, I see my tits up there. Great. Very nice, Adidas. So I went to do a video. I'm in my robe. I had really just gotten out of the shower and I'm like, oh, I have this idea for a video really quick. I set my cell phone on the little ring that holds my hand towels and I hit record and I just like off the cuff, Pat didn't even know I was recording. I start yelling to him in the other room, like, hey, Pat, did you see that Adidas ad with the titties? Blah, blah, blah. And I open up my robe to look at my own tits and thinking
what you're allowed to do because they're
I'm
yours.
allowed to do. But thinking that at the angle I was at, no one would be able to see my tits. And so throughout the video, I keep opening the robe up to look at my tits in the mirror. I watched it back like 7 times.
I love this so much because I know you and like getting out of the shower, you're like, oh man, I got to do something wacky with these Adidas tits. They're going wild on Twitter. I got to capitalize on these titties.
I literally got the idea in the shower and I was like, because I'm so instant gratification. I'm like, it's in my head. I got to do it right now.
Or you'll never, it's either coming out right now
or I won't do it.
Never.
That's exactly how I am. And so I'm like, I got to do it right now. Cause it is weird that my tits, there was a possibility that my tits could be out because those were my tits, you know? That was a weird thing to do. Anyway, I'm flashing my tits to the mirror, but from the side.
Breaking records with titty mentions here on the show. We've said tits no less than 150 times.
Our 3 guests, our 3 different, very accomplished intellectual guests who are like probably listening to this part together.
It's going to be one where they share it and like start at minute 34.
Long story short, I watched it back like 6 times. So twice. I watched it back twice. I was like, this is perfect. I post it. I didn't see my nipples at all. And that's what I was looking for. I didn't see it. You could see like, it's like flat, but
you've seen them so often. Like, it's not like they're going to stick out.
I think I'm nipple blind. I'm nipple blind. I post it immediately. I start getting, but I didn't check my phone for like an hour. So I didn't know this. I open up my phone.
God.
Immediately. I have a bunch of DMs being like, "Milady, quick note, your nipples be out." You know, like, oh, I get a bunch of comments.
Very nice of your family from Galway.
Yeah. This guy, Dirtman14, commented. He was the first one. He's like, "Titties, I see titties," and all these other people were like, "Oh yeah," and I'm like, okay, I didn't, whatever. It was on Twitter then. You still couldn't really see him. Some guy screen recorded the video on his phone and then slowly played it back, froze it, took a screenshot of when you can actually see my nipple, and then tweeted it out for everyone to see. It's like very clearly.
But you did such a boot. Like, I have a bunch of followers move on Twitter that it was mind blowing to me. Like, why is the sun directly covering like half of my face?
I don't know. You're glowing.
So you take that this guy from Philly that has like 150 followers or something like that tweets
like
at it at
1,000.
Kate. No, that guy doesn't have 1,000.
I think, yeah, he had like a good amount of followers. I think he had like over 1,000, which whatever.
Still, but
I
then
deleted it.
But
I
you have
replied.
well over 100,000 followers, and then you have 70,000 on Instagram, and you're like, by the way, there's all these pictures of me floating around with my nipples out. Like that's not an absolute bugle horn call to the horny members of society.
But I feel like, I don't know. I think maybe it's having a baby or something. Before I probably would have been like really upset by this. I felt nothing. I feel like I hand to God, swear to God on my whole family, you could take my titties right now, put them on a screen in Times Square and be like, these are Kate May's titties. Everybody make fun of them, whatever. And I could sit in Times Square smoking a cigarette and be like, have at it, man. I don't give a fuck. I just don't care.
Yeah,
Anyway.
I think that's the same way. Like because I think because you're still in the throes of breastfeeding, like that's part of it.
Man,
Like you
take a look at him.
After a while, you're just like, whatever, dude. Like I'm gonna feed my kid wherever I'm at. This is just the way it's gonna go down. And two, you only have the bandwidth to care about so much,
right?
Really. Like,
and you're right. I've had my titties out on a plane feeding them. I have had my titties out in a park feeding them. I've had my titties out in a restaurant feeding them. I just like, and you can't, there's no hiding it. Like I'm not wearing a giant cover over myself. Fuck off. Like, yeah. Anyway, those are my nipples. Damn it. Go take a look on my Instagram at Kate Barstool. It's still up.
Let's get going with the actual rounds today because there's a shit ton to talk about. This might break our record for longest show, but that's okay. Round number one. Have you ever gone ice fishing, Kate?
A couple times with my, like a long time ago when I was a little kid, because Pennsylvania, it gets cold enough. And my uncle's a big fisherman and stuff. I grew up fishing and doing all that stuff. So yeah, a couple times, but not in a nice shack, not more just like going out for the day, swirling the little thing on Marsh Creek and just.
I want to do the glamping version where it is like where they have like an actual yurt out there that you can hang out in.
I was going to save it for the end. Did you know there are luxury ice fishing shacks, which essentially, those like $150,000 RVs.
Mm-hmm.
It's essentially like the inside of those, but obviously without the wheels and like right on the ice that they'll drag on the ice for you. Like $30,000-$40,000 ice shanties with king size beds, big screen TVs, full on generators. Like people like live.
But how did they get those out of there?
Like, they drag them. They're all like on a sled essentially, and they get dragged out into the ice, like on the boat ramps on them.
That would be a dangerous proposition because you don't want to leave ice fishing season too soon, but you definitely don't want to leave it too late.
No, I'm sure if you're spending that much money, I'm sure you got it down.
Oh, there's got to be an app for that. Like, hey, time to get the shanty the fuck out of here.
Shanty app. It's a shanty app.
All right, let's move on to round number one. Kate, what do we got here?
The mayor of an Ohio town recently voiced his opposition to allowing ice fishing at a local park by inexplicably linking that pastime to prostitution. Mm-hmm. So he's saying, if we bring in ice fishers, we're going to have hookers in here. Mayor Craig Schubert of Hudson, Ohio, made his comments at a council meeting this week during a discussion about the safety and liability issues if the park allowed ice fishing. If you open this up to ice fishing, which while on the surface it sounds good, then what happens next year? Does somebody come back and say, I want an ice shanty in Hudson Springs Park for X amount of time? And if you then allow ice fishing with shanties, then that leads to another problem, prostitution. And now you have the police chief of the police department involved. Just some data to consider. This is very much if you give a mouse a cookie.
Oh, yeah. You know what it kind of reminded me of? It reminded me of the scene in Monty Python Search for the Holy Grail when it's like, how do we know she's a witch? She turned me into a newt. I got better. Like, it's just this insane line of logic. Like, well, if she floats, then she's made of wood. Then she's a witch and we must burn her. That's exactly what this is. You start ice fishing. Next thing you know, you're getting your dick sucked by some fucking, what are those people called at the truck stops?
Lot lizard.
Lot lizard. Yeah.
Yeah. You're enjoying time with your family. Next thing you know, you're getting pegged on 6 inches of slippery. It's a slippery slope. Some would say ice fishing. In response to the mayor's comments, city council member Craig Banweg responded, "That's why I'm not in favor of shanties." Attendees laughed. We're all goofing here. Ice fishers Ice fishers can fall through the ice into sub-zero waters, injure themselves with equipment, set themselves aflame, or even inhale toxic levels of carbon monoxide due to rudimentary heating systems inside their shanties, according to a 2017 Mayo Clinic study on ice fishing injuries. So those were all real things he could have said, but did not. Instead, he went straight to prostitution. I will say
Mayo
this.
Clinic does so many important things. Imagine being a doctor at the Mayo Clinic and you've gone to like John Hopkins or something like that, some prestigious medical school, and your boss brings you in like, hey, we need to do this report. There's all kinds of things going on. Sure, boss, no problem. What do you need? I need you to do a report on ice shanties. We got all kinds of burns popping up because of these bad boys.
But I will tell you this, like Wisconsin, Minnesota, whatever, like I bet you the hospitals up there see an enormous amount of ice fishing injuries in the wintertime. Like, I bet that is like a real thing, because I have some facts for you, chaps.
Oh.
Ice fishing is the 4th most popular winter activity in Wisconsin, following,
Snowboarding,
sledding, snowmobiling, and ice skating, and then ice fishing. That's what people are doing. Of the 1.4 million fishing licenses sold in the state every year, a third of those people go ice fishing. 14 million fish are caught during ice fishing season. Almost half are kept. And yeah, so it's like a ton of people are out in the ice, like tons of them. Did you know, how thick do you think the ice has to be before you can head out there safely?
24 inches.
4. That's it.
Oh, wow. That's it.
4 inch. Ladies, if you're getting 4 inches is all you need.
4 inches. That's
4
nothing.
inches. Right.
That's all you need for a shanty?
4 inches. And that takes about 1 week's worth of steady below freezing temps. And so then
that's it.
That's it. 4 inches, my friend.
Wow.
4 inches. So that's ice fishing for you. I did do a Google because I was like, he had to have heard this somewhere, or he has gotten his dick sucked in an ice shanty. And that's how he knows. I did Google it. I Googled terms like ice fisherman caught with prostitute to see if any news stories popped up. There was a survey in Minnesota, a sex buyer survey, where they just put it out to like the whole state, like anonymous. If you're a sex buyer, like what are your trends? And a good amount were ice fisher. Like that is a thing. Bringing prostitutes to your ice.
Well, I mean, if you want to get warmed up.
And also company on the lake. Yeah. I bet you a lot of times they're just talking about life.
Yeah, it's probably not even just necessarily a sex thing. It's probably they just log onto an app, they see somebody and they're like, hey, I'd like to talk to this lady out there, see what her gums are doing.
Yeah, a lot of nice prostitutes anyway. I think it should be legalized personally.
Oh, definitely legalized. Any type of, like the sex work, whatever you have, what other bits you got down there, they're yours. If you want to use them to make money, you should be able to.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. Now, that being said, that would make a lot of extra work for the MPs at military base gates. A lot of people coming in.
True.
That was the case.
But what if you just like had a contract with a company?
Brilliant.
I mean, the PX could have it.
PXXXX. That's good.
That was good, right?
Something to think about. All right.
To roll around. Mm-hmm. All right, let's move on to round number 2. This one is very military vibes, and there's one part that is the reason why I included it. I want to see if you can guess. Whenever you think that it's the part of the reason why I wanted to include this, you let me know. Okay. All right. So this one comes to us from The Guardian. A valuable avant-garde painting has been vandalized by a bored security guard who drew eyes on the faceless figures in the artwork on his first day working in the Russian gallery.
His first day. He didn't even wait. He couldn't even wait.
This painting that's called The Three Figures was painted between 1932 and 1934 and has been insured for $1.3 million. Oof. It was on display as part of an abstract art exhibit at the Boris Yeltsin Presidential Center when the guard drew eyes on it using a ballpoint pen. Alexander Drozdov, the executive director, did not identify the security guard in the statement, but said that he worked for a private security company and had been fired. Yeah. His motives are still unknown, as the administration believes it was some kind of lapse in sanity. The ink has slightly penetrated into the paint layer since it was a tantalum white that was used to paint the faces, not covered with the author's varnish. So he's doing all this. Damn, where is it? Okay, the vandalism was first noticed on December 7 by 2 visitors who raised the alarm with the gallery. The painting was removed. I fucking cut out the most important part, Kate. I did it myself.
Go on.
It's not here. I can't. This was the reason why I wanted to include it was from a different news source. This was his first day on the job.
Oh, that's why I said, no, you included it. I said it. I was like, first day is fucking first day.
Oh, I did include it. Where at?
It's right at the top. It's right at the top. It's in the very first sentence. His first day. I like, because normally in my mind, I'm like, this is somebody who's been stuck guarding this room for like a year and they can't fucking take it anymore. They've wanted to draw eyes on this thing for months and months and they broke. Nope. This guy had been in there for like an hour. I was like, fuck it. This thing needs eyeballs, and drew eyeballs on it. I love it. Imagine if it had been a Write in the Rain pen. They'd never be able to fix this
or one of those astronaut pens that you can write upside down with. That would be incredibly difficult to get out. How do you, if you're the manager of like this museum and you're in charge of protecting like all this priceless art, first of all, those people are usually weirdos, like talking to those. I know one of your friends is a Smithsonian curator and all that stuff, Kate, but typically art folks that can identify art, I don't trust them right away.
Oh, I love them. Oh, what?
I know you do, but I got to be honest in how I feel, and I don't trust them.
What? Anyway, they're for $4,600 is what it's going to cost to repair this thing. At least they're able to repair it. You know, at least that's a plus. I looked into other art mess ups. Every museum I'm sure has stories they could tell about either workers there or visitors fucking shit up. What do you think the number one cause of art getting fucked up is, chaps?
Children.
No, people taking selfies.
Really?
Taking selfies. And a huge amount of the stories I found were people either climbing up onto sculptures they weren't supposed to get a selfie, or accidentally backing into sculptures while they were doing it. So there's
Do
this
you
art.
buy that flashes from cameras can ruin art? I don't buy it.
No, I don't think so. I think that's crazy. I know sunlight can, but this one, the pop-up gallery at 14th Factory in Los Angeles. 14th Factory is this big, huge, fancy art gallery. A selfie taker knocked down almost an entire installation with such jaw-dropping precision. There's a YouTube video that has millions of views now, 7 million. It looks like dominoes. It was this room full of white pillars with art pieces on top of it. She leans back, taking a selfie, knocks the first thing over, and everything falls. People thought it was like fake or whatever. It wasn't. She caused over $200,000 worth of damage.
Are you liable for that if you do that?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
That'd be so. If you were in there,
if it was an accident,
like you're goofing around, taking some videos for your Instagram. Next thing you know, you caused $200,000 worth of damage to priceless art. You would be so nervous because you wouldn't know what was going to happen. Like, am I liable for this? Because if you break a cup in like TJ Maxx, you might have to pay for it.
I think if they can show it was like truly I don't know. It's complicated. There was also the story of this couple put their child inside at the Prittlewell Priory Museum in Essex. There was a sarcophagus, an Egyptian sarcophagus. It was already in 3 pieces. They went over the rope and put their kid in it to take a picture of their kid in the mummy tomb. Basically, the rest of the thing, the whole sarcophagus then proceeded to just crumble apart with their fucking child inside of it.
I feel like you could do that to a baby that is less than 2.
And any more than that, it's like at the giant.
Because like Cash doesn't know what a sarcophagus is. If you put him in there, he's probably like, "Oh, I'm hanging out in a different kind of dryer."
But any older than that, please stop putting your kids in sarcophaguses, please.
Yeah, sarcophagi.
And then this is the best one of all for me. An American student sought internet fame when he crawled inside a vagina-shaped sculpture outside Tübingen University in Germany. He accidentally entombed himself in the supersized work. It took 5 fire trucks and 22 firefighters to get him out of this vagina sculpture. Chaps, can you see the photo that I put on the thing?
I can.
It's like almost like if the Grand Canyon squeezed together to look like a pussy, and he's stuck inside of it, and he's laying there as a bunch of firefighters try and pull him out of this.
Volunteer firefighters, because they had no idea how to work their way around a vagina.
I know they were trying to. They thought they were hitting there was no way to get him out. That's one of those scenarios.
Did you shy away from saying clit there?
I did.
You did. You really did. Like
Clitoris.
I saw you put your hand up and you were going to motion to a giant stone clitoris, and you decided not to.
Yeah, clitoris. Anyway, this is one of those cases where if you're another American student at this university, how when there's bad news about in the US, sometimes we're like, don't be a veteran, don't be a veteran.
Right.
I bet they were like, please don't be American, please don't be American. And lo and behold, yeah.
They were.
They were. Surprise.
All right, let's move on to round number 3, which today is going to include our good friend Dan Lamothe, who's been on the show several times. Anytime that He drops a big time article on Washington Post. He usually does. It's huge news, and this is no different. So we're going to bring him on now to talk about what actually happened in the last few days in Afghanistan. All right, now it's time to get into another issue that is going to make a lot of you upset. We have Dan Lamothe from the Washington Post, who has been burning the midnight oil over the past couple of weeks and really the past couple of months. But it seems like it's gotten really intense for you over the last couple days, really, like with these articles that you're dropping on the Washington Post. If you haven't checked them out, you definitely need to get more details than we'll be able to give you right here. But Dan, can you walk us through, first of all, how the Freedom of Information Act, I think, is something that's largely misunderstood in the population as a whole. When you have these types of events that, one, the military hasn't exactly been forthright about, and they're kind of trying to skirt the issues, but journalists have a tool in the Freedom of Information Act that skirts around the DOD not wanting to have their press secretary come out. Can you walk us through what that process is like when you recognize, okay, this is something that I need to put in a request for to get this information?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. So FOIA, we would usually call it for short. It's a process where you can put in a request. You have to kind of tailor that request to something specific. And then there's both a waiting period and often kind of a dance that goes back and forth between the government and journalists and whoever else is looking for these documents. So in this case, you have obviously this big ugly event. We put in a number of FOIAs in that time frame, trying to get at various angles of things, and I'm sure we're not the only ones. We never really know what's going to come back when that happens. There are times where they will send sort of a sanitized summary report of the larger investigation report, and then there are times where up front they will also release all the witness statements, all the interviews. In this case, the Pentagon on Friday last week rolled out an investigation that explained what happened in that awful Abbey Gate bombing in Afghanistan last August. They went through kind of their top line findings, which was largely that it was a single explosion that apparently caused all that damage and all that chaos and death. Right around the same time frame, the FOIA release came to the Washington Post, and I believe possibly other outlets too. I'm actually not sure about that. Zip file, 15 PDFs, 2,000 pages, give or take.
Right.
And so it's released on basically a Friday night on a week where you're already dealing with the Ukraine crisis and the Syria raid all at once. So this story mattered to me. So even with all that, Friday night and Saturday night till after midnight, I started combing through these documents. And yeah, I mean, the commentary was very striking. It included a lot of people that we haven't heard from before. The senior commanders on the ground, all three of them, one Marine, one soldier, and one SEAL, all describing what they did, what they dealt with, their frustrations with DC over various aspects of how the evacuation was staged and sequenced, their belief that they needed to have more ready sooner. And there seemed to have been a pretty deep rift in particular between the military and the embassy.
And when you were looking at this, all these different 2,000 pages that came through, when you came across, what was your first inclination? Okay, this is a little bit different than what we first heard. What kind of made your eyes open a little bit wider late at night?
So because it was ostensibly an investigation of the bombing itself, I was expecting the statements to be largely focused on that. And frankly, that would have been enough to get me to read at that time of night. But what was striking was the breadth of the questions they asked went well beyond that day, and kind of got into how the evacuation began, what the discussion was prior to August, when they were kind of going back and forth about whether or not they needed to prepare for this kind of thing, and the names of the majority of the service members are withheld, they're redacted from the report. But typically senior officers, brigadier general and up, those names are included. So it was very clear Admiral Vasily, General Donahue, and General Sullivan. Their three names are in there, and they don't hold back a whole lot. I mean, they're pretty blunt.
I was pretty shocked at just how blunt they were, Kate.
Yeah. I was gonna say it was more of a deep dive into like, how did we get to the point of the bombing? And one of the things that made my eyes open was seeing so many, even at the lowest level, of troops being like, we knew this was going to happen. We knew it. And it made my heart sink. It's crazy.
I mean, days and days and days of warnings, right. To the point of like on occasion, like, very direct, within 30 minutes, expect X. And those were all previously false alarms. And I think that adds an extra level here of, it really makes it really drills home the point how dangerous this mission was. Mm-hmm. And yes, you had the one bombing, and there were a couple other earlier, attacks and things of that hadn't really surfaced in August that we now know about as well.
Do you mind speaking to a couple of those? Yeah, because that was new to me too. I had no idea.
Yeah, so among the one that really for me was pretty shocking was we heard back in August about these Afghan special operations forces. They're usually called the Zero units, kind of casually, and they were pulled into the evacuation operation. They were working the gate. It provided forces that could speak the language, but it was kind of this deal where kind of unofficially, you do this, and then we'll give you a ride out at the end, and you too can evacuate. But at some point, those Afghan forces came under fire. The belief is from somewhere outside the airport. You had Taliban out there, you had many other armed people out there. It's really not clear who was shooting, but one of those Afghans was killed, and their response was to open fire on the Marines nearby. The Marines returned fire. One of those Afghans was killed. 6 more of those Afghans was wounded, and you ended up with a pretty big dust up that required intervention by General Donahue, General Sullivan, and eventually the ambassador. Like, they had to kind of sort this out and make sense of how they were going to deal with this. The Afghan forces apparently took responsibility for the incident after the fact, and things calmed down. But they also sort of lost all their help from this unit at North Gate. After that, it was sort of like they weren't doing anything else, to help the effort anymore.
And those commanders on the ground all know that that's going on and how that's going to affect future operations, and having people that are willing to, I guess, side with you, for lack of a better term. One of the things that I picked up from your reporting, and correct if I'm reading this wrong, whenever they were having the planning, several times President Biden went into these meetings, and after the meetings were getting close to concluding, was asking, is there anything else that you need to make this successful? Was it pie in the sky ideas that the commanders on the ground, the higher commanders at DoD headquarters, thought that this was going to go more smoothly than it ended up going? Or where was the regret from higher headquarters as far as not asking the president for more resources?
I think there's a couple things going on here. One is that, and that comment that was passed on to me from the president, I think it's important because it shows that there was communication straight from the president down to the ground commander, with it kind of flattening communications in a crisis, which is typical and kind of what you would hope for. So there's that, and the desire, what else do we need? Do we need more aircraft? Like all of that sort of thing was a part of it. There was also a discussion of whether or not they could potentially extend the evacuation beyond August. The hang up there being you had Taliban cooperation and security at the edge of the airport. The moment that got turned off, and the Taliban, very clearly responded poorly to this based on these documents. If you had no Taliban cooperation, the whole thing probably falls apart. So they made the decision. It was apparently pretty close to unanimous that there really was no alternative. They had to end it August 31st, regardless who was left. And the alternative, you're probably looking at firefights on the airport, civilians killed, Marines killed, all of that kind of thing. And that was just a bridge too far. So you ended up where you ended up.
One of the other things that stood out to me and just made me, there's many things in this that made me go, was the White House and State Department officials saying they failed to grasp the Taliban's steady advance on Afghanistan's capital and resisted efforts by the Pentagon to prepare the evacuation of embassy personnel and Afghan allies weeks ahead of time. I just feel like that this is less of a question, more than a cut, but like, I feel like there's no possible way that could be true. They had to, is there any proof of, were they not getting reports? Did they not get, because a Lance Corporal who was there 5 years ago could have told you, who just follows the news, could have been like, oh yeah, they took over all the cities. Why would you not think that that this is going to happen? Like, why on earth would they think that?
I think what it comes down to in part is how quickly do you think the end is coming? Virtually everybody back in August said we knew, the government could collapse. Nobody seemed to think it would collapse in August. They thought they had till the fall or maybe early, in 22. The fact that it happened within days, that was the part that seemed to catch everybody flat-footed.
And I do kind of agree that it did really catch them flat-footed, because Secretary Blinken doesn't come out the days before it and says, oh, it's not going to fall in 72 hours. And then it does fall in 72 hours. You don't put your foot in your mouth if you don't like that, if it's not a real expectation. But it raises the question, how the fuck do you not know? Like,
how the fuck do you not know?
Even if it
like,
is genuine.
My mind was so blown by that, because I feel like just following the news, I was like, well, yeah, like,
even if it is genuine, it's like, how can you be so genuinely wrong?
Yeah, it's
you
crazy.
typically would plan around the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
And clearly the assessment on what the worst case scenario was wrong. There's an old phrase going back to Vietnam called decent interval. And I've heard people involved in this describe it that way here too. The United States thought they had a decent interval of time before they left, before everything fell apart, which would get Americans out of harm's way. And from the political point of view, also wouldn't leave you holding the bag quite so clearly. In this case, we were stuck in the mess in large part because they didn't understand how quickly things were going to go sideways.
Go ahead, Kate.
One of the other interesting parts of this was, I was saying to Chaps before you came on, I was like, well, we were part of this part of the mess, was all the campaigns on social media from veterans, from politicians, from the Pope himself, the First Lady, all these movements of people reaching out directly to soldiers. Even lower enlisted soldiers are getting messages on the ground. They're being like, you got to get my guy out. You got to get this family out. And the commanders were saying openly, this really added to the mess. This added to part of the mess, which made them so much more vulnerable. The troops outside the gate. Then
members of Congress showing up unannounced.
And I feel like, well, geez, I felt reading, I'm like, man, we were part of that too. We were part of what added to that mess.
Dan, can you release us from any responsibility and just say that it wasn't our fault? What happened?
Can you tell us that it's not us?
I don't think it falls down on a single individual 8,000 miles away. But with that said, it does make me wonder, what the perception of a company commander or a platoon leader would be versus Admiral Daisley, because we certainly have heard other accounts that the coordination with especially some of the more organized groups was not necessarily detrimental and helpful in certain cases. Admiral Daisley also said that there was quote goodness in some of this, but sort of that the overall situation sucked resources, killed bandwidth, and that they eventually had to kind of develop on the fly staff specifically to deal with this issue.
Again,
have you seen much response from veterans and people that follow it closely about the wording that some of these folks are using, like their heart was in the right place or their feelings about it were intentional? When I read that, it was infuriating. Like, I don't give a shit about what the feeling is behind my government. I want them to be efficient and be able to conduct operations the way that they need to. Like, where your heart is at does not matter. I don't usually ascribe to the facts, not feelings type of thing, but this is a big facts, not feeling. This operation was a travesty in a lot of ways. And still Secretary Austin and others are still trying to say that it's this monumental achievement and things like that. Do you think using flowery language like that is really flying in the face of what actually happened?
I put this in the context of both things can be true.
Right.
130,000 people out or something.
Yeah,
Was
and every time
monumental.
somebody tries to downplay how much chaos there was, how much potential there was for complete carnage, and how much we were kind of stuck dealing with this awful situation, they tend to point to the successes that were there. And certainly there was a historic number of people that were evacuated. There certainly was a whole lot of valor on the ground, a whole lot of people basically working to the point of exhaustion. All of that is true. What I thought these documents were valuable to do, though, was to show that this wasn't all kumbaya behind the scenes, that there was great frustration from people very senior in the government, that not everything was as flowery as being depicted. And while some people would say, we had no idea this was coming, there are others who said, we could kind of see the possibility of something going bad at some point. And when you've got a one-star Marine general involved in the planning saying that he was trying to put food and water for 5,000 people at the airport in July, weeks before this happened, like that shows some forethought in some parts of the government that they could have done more and didn't.
And are they using this as almost a lessons learned? Because right now, according to multiple reports from different outlets, we're seeing that the 82nd Airborne is going to be moving into Ukraine and have the possibility of doing another mass evacuation for Americans that are leaving Ukraine and other Ukrainian citizens that need to get out as well. Are they taking some of these lessons learned and what happened in Afghanistan and applying them in the planning of what's going on in the Ukraine that you know of?
I'd actually probably have to push back on that one a bit, because my own reporting would say that the 82nd is planning for probably waves of evacuees and refugees and that kind of thing. If it goes in that direction, maybe there is planning for some sort of evacuation involving U.S. forces behind the scenes. But right now, they're kind of describing this as a on the Polish side of the border sort of thing.
Okay.
That they don't want a repeat of Afghanistan, and frankly, considering the differences in terms of what the Russian military can do versus the Taliban, putting U.S. forces in there, it's not hard to picture C-17s getting blown out of the sky. Like, it's not an easy direct comparison you can make, and I think that's going to influence how they can respond and how they can help.
And with these types of reports and reading everything that's going on behind the scene, there's a lot of folks that end up looking bad, including the President of the United States and the Secretary of State. They end up looking bad. Is there anybody that you saw in the reports that you're like, that person probably should have a louder voice in the future? Was there anybody that came across looking good?
One thing that struck me, and I think a critic might say this was self-serving between them. But I was struck that when you have three officers thrown together reasonably at last minute, two of them of the same rank, they were able to get along, effectively work, effectively communicate. Vasily, Donahue, and Sullivan, these three senior officers that were on the ground, the fact that they didn't, they were able to put aside whatever differences of opinion might have been there, put aside ego, and just basically work to the point of exhaustion and acknowledge up front, there's no way I can be in charge of all of this. So let me, kind of slice this up. You deal with the gates, you deal with the Taliban, and I'll deal with the up and out stuff with DC. Like that, I think, without that, I think this could have been worse. Mm-hmm. And then if you want to dig in farther, the stories of the Marines on the gate, the 82nd that was dealing with the security, they had 40 to 50 people jump the fence nightly, supposedly. Yeah. And those were the ones they were finding. So who knows what they missed? But the fact that, you have that account of, I guess a deeper level of chaos that they were dealing with. And, we walked away with one horrific bombing that was awful, but it happened toward the end and you didn't have that kind of carnage throughout. I think really speaks to how hard everybody else had to work.
And also the remarkable nature of the junior enlisted and junior officer, of them performing the way that they did and getting 130,000 people out in a short period of time and doing it with chaos behind the scenes. It really shows that how effective those troops can be when called upon.
Donahue, who's an Army general, was very complimentary of the Marines, the young Marines. In particular, the Lance Corporal level, he was really struck by that. and in particular, the company of Marines that had to deal with the most devastation, Gulf Company 2-1, they come across really, really well here, not only on the day of the bombing, but in the aftermath. There was an effort to demilitarize the airport. Some of that, I mean, we recall the photographs of, spray painting and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That was not perceived well in all corners. The Marines from the unit who had to deal with the most tragedy apparently handled that quite professionally when they had to do that other job afterward. And that was also praised.
Wow.
Well, I guess that's the good news that we do have some Lance Corporals that are still good.
Yeah.
That's a nice note. And before we let you go, can you kind of walk us through, you also have a report coming out about what happened in Syria. Can you walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, so we've been digging through this raid. We did some reporting at the time. Had a big story last week, kind of, on day of. But yeah, there's more work to be done there. It's going to be trying to get at an understanding of what actually happened. You've got some unclear details here. One piece that has been confusing for a lot of people is how basically the building could be brought down that way. And the belief is that it's not just a suicide vest, that it was something more formal. The explosion was larger than that. So digging into that piece is a part of it. And we've still got some confusion on civilian casualties here. The white helmets and some of these other first aid responder groups have said 13 killed. They said that very quickly after the explosion. The military is acknowledging up to 9 at this point. And this isn't like 9 killed by Americans necessarily. The majority were killed by the explosion set off by the ISIS leader. But you've still got a delta there of, was it 9 dead? Was it 13 dead? Who are the 9? How did they die? That's going to take time to sort through.
Yeah.
And lastly, I want to mention it because I told some folks that I would. One of the main aspects of being able to report on these issues, and the reason why in the past in Iraq and Afghanistan, why we've had accurate information like Dan is being able to give here, is because we've had journalists embedded with different military units. Right now on the Eastern Bloc in Ukraine and Poland, we're not allowed to have embed. Can you talk from your perspective as a journalist who covers in a much more serious way than we do here, how that affects your ability to present to the American public what's actually happening with our armed forces?
I mean, when you've got eyes and ears on the ground and you can talk to sergeants and that sort of thing, the depth on the reporting is much deeper. It's more meaningful. You can tell the stories from the bottom up where you have the rank and file points of view represented. We're in a place right now where there were journalists preparing to go. I've still got a suitcase in my living room packed, but I have no expectation of actually leaving anytime soon.
Your wife must love that. She just must.
I mean, in this case, you're not talking about going into Ukraine, so I wouldn't say this is the scariest assignment I've ever had by a long stretch. It's more just basically plan to go and freeze your butt off kind of thing. I mean, you're going to be outside in Poland in the middle of February.
But you might be able to get a good pierogi.
Yeah, right.
Silver linings.
But yeah, I mean, as I look at it, right now, there's been some back and forth on this. Military Reporters and Editors Organization has called for embeds. The White House Correspondents Association has backed them. You're starting to see other letters, kind of a messaging campaign of this needs to happen. There was a back and forth at the Pentagon already. Pentagon Press Secretary John Kirby acknowledged these concerns, says he respects those concerns. It's not clear that he's really the one that's making the final call either. I mean, that's another piece here. I mean, he's got to speak to it. As we look at it, I think one thing that this is hinging on right now is they're still trying to highlight that there's a open possibility of some sort of diplomatic solution, even though I think the window by most accounts is closing pretty fast. So for now, they don't want a whole bunch of stories about a whole bunch of guys with guns just across the border.
Right.
I can kind of see the logic in part, but I think
in reality,
there's
they
a window
know
where
there's a
that's
whole
going to
bunch of
close
folks
too.
with guns too.
And if you end up with an invasion in Ukraine, the appetite for what the 82nd is going to be doing across the border whether it's a humanitarian mission, whether there's some sort of, specific need to do something that's more significant than that, you're going to have to get, potentially close the embassy in Kyiv as well. I mean, you've got Marines there as well. All of that we're going to have to sort through, and hopefully there would be some additional access, at least at that point.
Yeah.
So that just basically summarizes that you will never be able to sleep again, Dan. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, Dan, thank you.
Thanks for playing.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to say thank you too. Like I obviously the end of everything, the way Afghanistan ended, I think about it all the time, and it's good to be able, because what the fuck happened, blah blah blah, and I'm so grateful that there's journalists out there working so hard to answer the questions that I've had. So thanks for what you do. I know it's not easy.
I appreciate that. I mean, this did affect a whole lot of veterans. It did affect a whole lot of civilians who spent time there. And I think the journalists are a good part of that. I mean, there was a period in August where, I was working there. If I was awake, I was working. And I hit a TV interview at one point where somebody asked me a question specifically about the bombing, and I got choked up on camera. I mean, it hit everybody. And I think that, like the direct line from that moment to this report, like as soon as I had it in my hands, I couldn't put it down. Like, it's too important.
Yeah.
And with journalists like yourself, like you're so involved that it's personal too. Like you've spent a lot of time there. And I think that that's reassuring to the public, is hearing people that are reporting on it from a non-biased perspective that just is trying to report the facts. You care about what you're
one of the people that did get out was, Washington Post staff, including the driver who kept me safe on numerous trips driving around Kabul. Like, I mean, there are personal ties there.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again, Dan. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Dan Lamothe for coming on the show and talking to us about Afghanistan. But that's not the only fucked up situation that we're covering for the military today. We also have Davis Winkie, who works for the Army Times, who's been, I would say, the Texas National Guard's worst nightmare of the past couple months. Davis, how are you doing, my friend?
Hey, chaps. Thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, man, we're excited to talk to you about. Well, I guess we're not excited about this subject because it's not great. There's been a lot of reporting, and I think that overall in the national scene, this story is kind of getting covered up because there's so many issues regarding the military in other places, whether you're talking about ISIS raids or if you're talking about what happened in Afghanistan. But what's happening on the southern border of Texas really shows that a lot of the units in the military right now are just grossly incompetent. Is that kind of what you're seeing going on at the border, Davis?
The border right now for the National Guard has been a really challenging mission over the past couple years or so. The Texas National Guard has its own border mission there called Operation Lone Star. They've got somewhere between 6.5 and they claim as many as 10,000 troops there on state active duty orders to supposedly secure the Texas-Mexico border. And then you've got just under 3,000 federally controlled National Guard troops who are officially supporting DHS along the entirety of the border. And what we've seen from both populations is just big issues with misconduct, especially among the federal guys, with having them equipped and, actually useful on mission. And heartbreakingly, we've seen a lot of them die. The federal mission lost 3 soldiers in summer 2021. And the Texas mission has lost 4 who were assigned to it and 2 who were identified to mobilize for it. And 4 of those deaths for the Texans came by suicide. It's just heartbreaking stuff.
And what type of misconduct are you talking about? Are we talking about underage drinking? Are we talking about just a little goof and some classic military stuff? Or is it more nefarious than that?
I mean, it's a little bit of everything. Loyal listeners might remember your discussion of my investigation on the federal mission in early December, where a lot of the issues were kind of what you might expect if you have Joe there. Oh, pardon my girlfriend's cats sprinting around.
This is a pro cat podcast. Spork's always lurking in your mind. Yeah.
But, if you put Joe in a hotel room in the continental United States with a whole lot of money, and they feel underutilized. They feel like their time is being wasted. You're going to see them get into trouble. And in certain situations and units where they didn't have like enough NCOs, or they had one battalion sized task force that had 1,000 people in it with only one understrength battalion staff trying to maintain command and control, you just see the usual bullshit get blown away, go out of control. With the Texas guys, what we're seeing is just more reckless type stuff. There was one guy who got into a bar fight in Del Rio with a border patrol agent over a woman, from what I'm tracking, and went out to his car, got his personal weapon, came back inside and held the border patrol agent at gunpoint. And when that's how local PD, when they showed up, found the border patrol agent just sitting there on his knees with the other guy pointing the gun at him.
Jesus.
Wow.
Like,
very Texas scenario, I will say. There's a classic country song all over it right there.
Well, and what's
not great.
one of the weird things about the Texas mission is, since they're on state orders, they have all these protections that allow them to have their personal weapons. Because Texas is a constitutional carry state. And we've seen now 4 negligent discharge incidents, at least.
And that was
4,
the cause.
actually.
That was the cause of this latest death, correct? It was an accident.
Yeah. Two of those NDs have had people get killed. One guy was drinking on New Year's and playing with a handgun, and accidentally shot and killed himself. And then just earlier this week, there were some soldiers in a car. They were having a training day off the border where they were doing like the combat water survival tests. I don't know if y'all have ever done that. And the guy in the front passenger seat was this 19-year-old specialist who had his personal handgun, and the PFC sitting in the back seat, I guess, asked to see it or something. And as he was handing it behind him, it fired through the seat, and he was dead on the scene.
Wow.
It's just really tough stuff.
So from higher headquarters in the Texas National Guard, what is the mission supposed to be, and what are they actually doing now? Because I think that sometimes when we have these state missions, the idea behind the mission can be good. It's almost like a case of good initiative, bad judgment, where I understand wanting to secure the border and things like that, but what's actually happening on a day-to-day basis that is keeping these troops there for such an extended period of time?
Yeah, like what Texas leaders say is that this mission is meant to help stem record levels of migration, human trafficking, and drug trafficking at the southern border. And apprehension data from Border Patrol, supports the argument that there's a crisis of sorts when it comes to at least the volume of human migration down there. And you can make a good faith argument that there's a role for the National Guard to play because federal resources are stretched so thin. But what we saw, though, with the way that Texas stood up this mission was between March of 2021 and September of last year, they had up to around 1,000 volunteers on the mission. It was all volunteers, kind of motivated, it's pretty easy to find good busy work for 1,000 Joes to do when you've got a border as long as Texas does.
Yeah.
But the problem started to arise when Greg Abbott decided to rapidly expand the mission in the fall, and they started involuntarily activating entire units and thousands upon thousands of troops. And in some cases, this came with as little as 72 hours notice for some of the soldiers that I've spoken to. And, a lot of active duty people might not understand, but as a part-time soldier myself, having to put my entire life down within 72 hours to be gone for a year, I don't know who I would call first. And that's what thousands of these kids had to do.
And I think that there's a big disconnect about what happens between the guard for folks that are on active duty. Like Kate and I, we don't really know a lot about the guard. Connor was never really doing guard stuff either on a consistent basis. So we don't have that first level experience. But what I always thought was that because there was federal laws in place that protect the National Guard from losing your job and things like that, I never thought the other steps that come along with that. Sure, you are not supposed to be fired from your job, but that doesn't mean that you're going to get paid the same amount from the guard that your civilian job might pay you. And those bills don't pause just because you're activated by the guard.
No, they don't. And one of the soldiers I spoke to for one of our joint stories with the Texas Tribune was a senior NCO who owned his own business.
I didn't even think about that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry.
He also has a child with a disability, and so he put in a request for a hardship, and it was kind of like, no, you need to come anyways. We need you. And so he lost $60,000 in contracts for his business. All of his employees quit because they've got to feed and pay their families,
right.
And had to scramble to get arrangements for his child. And he ended up getting released early from the mission, probably because of his commanders being like, hey, no, this guy actually has issues at home. Let's try to let him fall through the cracks and go home in between onboarding and actually go to the border. But it was too late. He hasn't been able to get a single contract for his business since. Can't find new employees at a good rate in this labor market. He had to sell his company van, which he just rebuilt the entire transmission on at like a cost of what it pretty much cost what he sold it for. And it goes from people like that all the way down to this one paratrooper I spoke with who he had to withdraw from college again because this is another big activation for them. And he's like, I'm going to be a 5th year junior when I get back. And my school has taken away my financial aid. And I haven't even had a chance to appeal that loss of aid yet because I keep getting pulled away before I can submit my orders and get my shit together with them. It's a lot of hardships from kind of the senior to the junior most level that really could have been mitigated if there had been more planning time, if there had been more lead time. A federal deployment, if you get alerted within 120 days, you can't be involuntarily mobilized to go OCONUS or to go on a Title 10 mobilization. Those protections aren't in place for state missions like this. Because state missions are usually like short fuse disaster response.
Right.
When I have a guard general from another state telling me that this is absolutely not what state active duty is designed to do, I think that raises serious questions about the way that senior leaders in Texas have decided to run this mission.
And I think that we can look at the issues of military and what happens in the military with both sets of glasses on, right? Like you can look at it and understand that anytime there's a military mission to be had, or that the powers that be, commanders in chief, whatever, either at the state level or at the national level, dictate the fact that you need to go on a mission, there is going to be some human cost about your life and your finances and how it affects your family. That's just kind of inherently part of being in the military. And I'm sure that that's how the military views it in Texas as well. What are they saying is justifying the mission continuing? And how long have they said that this mission is it going to be essentially a 20-year thing like Afghanistan? Or what is Texas saying in response?
Because I'm butting into, but like these stories have to be reaching Greg Abbott and other politicians there. Like, yeah, what the fuck? To put it eloquently.
So far, the response from Texas leaders has been really to double down and say no. There are drug seizures, there are apprehensions happening. There is they're trying to say that an increase in apprehensions in Yuma sector all the way over in Arizona is evidence that that Operation Lone Star is having a deterrent effect. Well, maybe. I don't think that's how like drug smuggling would work. You know, do you think the rival cartels with different territory are going to be like, oh no, Texas threw up the stop sign, let's go over here? No, they're smuggling it through in compartments and vehicles at ports of entry anyways.
Mm-hmm.
And
there is some legitimate problems, because I don't want that to seem like we're not saying that there isn't legitimate problem. There is, like human trafficking from South Texas into Mexico and the converse of that are legitimate problems that we're experiencing. The issue that I have with the way that we're doing it is it seems like there's not a tactical approach on how to stop some of these issues, and we're doing it smarter and not harder. Will Hurd, for example, the former congressman from that area of Texas, which stretches from El Paso basically down to Laredo in the San Antonio area, he talked about having electronic monitoring so that we can pick up and monitoring big groups of people that were going over, because with the size that Texas is, you can have 3,000, 10,000, 50,000 troops at this border. It's enormous. You're not going to have enough that it's going to really make a sizable impact on what's going on the border. You have to do it in a different way.
Yeah.
And something to keep in mind is that the majority of people crossing want to be found or are trying to turn themselves in to start an asylum claim. Mm-hmm. You know, like there's been lots of scenarios where people will cross over, go to the first person in a uniform they see and be like, hey, we want to request asylum. Mm-hmm. And what we see as a result is that some of these Texans out on the border feel really underutilized, whether there go the cats, whether they're, you know, in a sector that doesn't really see much migration or smuggling, like there's some people who have been in Zapata just staring at Falcon Lake since October. You know, there's not much going on there. I know there's been drug smuggling and stuff there in the past, but those guys feel underutilized because they're just sitting there and nothing's happening.
And that's
I think that
go ahead, Kate.
Well, I think that's what compounds, like you're talking about the suicides. And I know in one of them, the person had sent a letter to his command, like, this is pointless for me right now. Please let me go. And he was denied that. We covered that in a previous episode. But I think that compounds, like, it's sort of like the disillusionment after a couple of tours to Afghanistan, where I was like, I don't know the point of this anymore, man. And it kind of was crushing to my morale. Even though I had volunteered and whatever, like, I feel like that has to make this so much worse, that the mission has become so convoluted for so many that they're stuck there with, like, I don't know. It's infuriating to me. It sucks.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, it's, you know, right now we're working on another story where we've obtained some responses to a morale survey they did. And a pattern that's popping up is people saying that they support the idea of the mission, or they support strong border security, but they feel like they're underutilized. You know, they feel like they're not
there's got to
really
be a better
helpful.
way. There's got to be,
you know, you're even seeing kind of the most conservative fringe elements on border security in Texas saying, like, you know, these service members are being used the wrong way. They need to be like diving in and arresting people and doing all this stuff. So you've got this situation where you're seeing Abbott and Texas leadership getting attacked from both the left with Beto O'Rourke, and from the right, from people like Alan West and Don Huffins, like, who are saying, like, no, this isn't being done the right way. It needs to be harsher and done with more respect to the soldiers' lives. It really seems like this is becoming an issue in Texas.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure, because it's easy. It's an easy political point to make. Like, oh, we're doing a lot to secure the borders. We have 5,000 people on the border, and that's not coming from Biden. Like, I see those commercials every fucking day, and it's almost like you wish that your TV at times was a touch screen where you could pause it and be like, well, what are those 5,000 doing? Like, if there was 5,000 and you could put 5,000 troops on the border and you could halt human trafficking and eliminate that from Texas and like the Texas-Mexico border, that would be fantastic if you can eliminate some of these issues. But in reality, you need to show, and I would say that the state of Texas needs to show that it's worth the effort. Like what we're actually doing is worth it. And that's been a problem, not just in Texas, but widespread across the military for so long. Have officials in Texas indicated to you how long they expect this type of mission to last?
So officially, they're kind of playing coy about how long this is going to be. Basically, their official stance is until it gets better. Mm-hmm. There are cynics out there who say it's going to last through November, which is when the governor's election is. Mm-hmm. But you know, we've had access to some recordings, some planning documents that show that the Texas Military Department is preparing to be here for the long haul. They're already planning replacement operations to involuntarily mobilize more units in the fall of this year to replace the ones who were mobilized last fall, and to keep up operations. And that raises a different concern for the Texas Guard, which is, you know, you've been burning the candle at both ends for a few years now when it comes to COVID operations, when it comes to civil disturbance operations. Texas prides itself on having the most federal deployments of any National Guard. Because they've got force structure and the highest end strength of any of the National Guards across the country. And when you've been doing everything at that pace, and then you add something like this border mission, which is, you know, 10,000 is almost half of their end strength on paper. Mm-hmm. And, you know, end strength on paper is a lie. You know, you've got kids in training, you've got people who are non-deployable, mm-hmm. you've got people pending discharge, mm-hmm. you know, like, I don't know how long they can sustain this for without breaking their force. Yeah. And what we're starting to see is early warning indicators in their retention data that they might be hemorrhaging personnel.
No doubt. No doubt they are. I mean, I would be shocked.
And then also with the vaccine mandate, man, you know, there's lawsuits right now. And, you know, Texas is one of the states fighting the hardest not to have to discharge vaccine refusers. But at least 8,000 members of the Texas National Guard are not vaccinated.
Wow.
If you lose 8,000 because of the vaccine, you're already tanking retention with this unsustainable op tempo. You know, there's people out there who are worried that the Texas National Guard in 12 months might barely exist.
Mm-hmm.
Damn.
Wow.
That's a good spot to end. If you're on that mission and you need to, and you want to post some videos or what you're actually doing, send those over to Davis Winkie and he'll be sure to take a look at them. We'll also take a look at them. Thanks for doing all the work that you're doing. I know it's a lot of work researching and doing all the inroads that it takes to get a report out like this. So we appreciate that, Davis, and for your service, man. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
We're just out here trying to take care of soldiers. Have a good one.
There we go. Yeah. So we have that story on the border here. Now we're going to go over to Ukraine and talk about what's going on at the border of Ukraine and Russia with our good friend Terrell Starr. Here he is. All right, now on Zero Block 30, we're privileged to have somebody who is living in Ukraine right now. He's an American citizen, but he's living in Ukraine and is doing all types of reporting on the situation between Russia and Ukraine. We've been talking about it a little bit on ZBT the last couple of weeks and trying to brush up, but we wanted to go someone that actually lives there, that has been studying this for a long time and is an expert in the field. So we brought on Terrell Starr, who is doing great things in the field. I saw a video this morning of you on Twitter, and it really just the video of you being in the town square in Kiev, it really changed my perspective, because I think a lot of times the American psyche is Ukraine is one spot. It exists on a tiny little spot on the map, and everything that happens in Ukraine happens in the
breaking loose right now. It's the same neighborhood. Yeah, seeing that kind of, I like took a breath when I went, oh, okay, all right. So
can you kind of walk us through what you've been seeing and just give us a primer on the relationship between Ukraine and Russia as it stands now?
Well, thank you very much for having me on the show. First of all, I always take it as an honor anytime someone thinks that I'm worthy enough of taking any of their time to explain anything. So again, thank you very much. But to give you a primer, basically the abridged version of it is that what people know in the kind of somewhat recent memory is that Russia invaded Ukraine back in 2014, but the reason why was because the then government of Viktor Yanukovych decided that he would not sign an agreement with the European Union that would strengthen its political ties. This happened back in late 2013, but the invasion started in 2014. Yanukovych was thrown out of the government precisely because he was overthrown basically by protests that became violent when the security forces shot into the crowds. That's important context because the annexation of Crimea and the occupation of Luhansk and the Donbass regions in eastern Ukraine occurred under this false premise of protecting Russian citizens or Russian speakers. And by Putin, that was the accusation, which is ironic because the vast majority of people who have died in this conflict, be they civilians or be they soldiers, have been Russian speakers, right? And so he's creating, and that's all these things are verifiable. So basically, he not only invaded on the false premise of protecting Russian speakers, the war that he created killed, when you look at the tallies, the vast majority of those folks were from Russian speakers or from Eastern countries, and so basically, what you have right now has been a frozen conflict that he created since 2014. And the escalation of this conflict has occurred over another false premise that Putin is making, which is NATO is threatening our regional security. Now, I'm working on several articles about this, and I know that you both have seen my tweets where I talk about being a progressive myself. And, somebody who has my own reservations, I'm very much an anti-imperialist, right? I'm also somebody who definitely speaks out against overreach of America, the Monroe Doctrine, all these things. I believe that America needs to completely recalibrate not only its military posture, but just the way that American foreign policy takes place. And so what's happening with Nipple was an exception here as opposed to Iraq and Afghanistan and Iran, which was cited in Bernie Sanders' recent column about this issue yesterday, is that Putin is operating, the thing about NATO is that the political culture of the countries that surround, that are close to Russia or Russia's, sphere of influence being, the former Warsaw Pact countries, Poland, et cetera. Then you have the former SSU countries, particularly former USSR countries with the Baltics up in the north, is that these countries wanted to join NATO because they felt like their militaries were not strong enough to fend off a Russian invasion on their own, and because they all were colonized at one point, during their country's history. And so what you're seeing right now are these, with this conversation about American troops being deployed, for example, to Eastern Europe, and it's just a few thousand, and they're doing that for the purposes of if we have to, evacuate people, for example, those things take place because this whole talk about NATO, forcing their hands or Russia, the number of troops that are deployed in these regions are so infinitesimally small compared to Russia that is not remotely capable of a military offensive. So the people who are making these claims don't understand how military operations work. That's one thing. I'll just stop there. But that's kind of like a bit of a primer. I can get into more details with Germany and the EU and everything, but that's just kind of what's happening.
No, I think it's important context to understand the last couple of years, because we even just mentioned about 2 weeks ago on this show, we mentioned the number of Ukrainian soldiers that have been killed in the conflict since 2014 at 14,000. I don't think that most Americans realize that or put that into context comparatively to what we've lost in the war on terror. It's more than twice the amount.
I had no idea.
And
what is the general, because I was surprised to see, like, you're right, in the news, it kind of seems like everything's chaos and this incredible tension, and you're walking the square in Kiev, which you said it's hundreds of miles away from, but people seem relatively calm. What is among the people there right now? what is the sentiment? Are they scared, or are they kind of just living life as usual? Like, oh, nothing's going to happen.
I feel like Ukrainians can't say they're scared either. I feel like that's very
it's not a Ukrainian vibe. You gotta
right. But Kate, you asked a really excellent question, and it's complex because people are so used to this threat happening or not happening that they can't they can't live their lives predicated on whether or not Putin's going to do something or not. Yes, there's some anxiety here amongst people. With my friends, for example, people have made plans. If I have to evacuate, this is where I'm going to go. So there are plans. People just have it in the back of their minds. And so once that becomes necessary, people are ready to mobilize. And then you have some civilian units here, that are preparing, to defend themselves. And they're working in concert with the Ministry of Defense to create a civilian, create civilian regiments around the city. So it's very serious, and people are taking this, with the seriousness that it deserves. But on the other hand, when I was posting that video, I just wanted to give people a general flow that daily commerce is taking place. People are still going back and forth to work. People are not really upending their lives about this, because what can they do? Their homes are here and all of their livelihoods are here. And I think in America, we are so pinned to our news cycle that focuses on what is going to make people gain attention. And so, of course, you're going to show videos from the front. You're going to show the geopolitics that are taking place, because that is what determines whether or not the people walking down the street are going to go as usual as they are versus the evacuation. So it's important. But the reality of it is that what can folks do? I was asking my Russian teacher today. When I shot that photo, I was just coming from class, and
looking dynamite too. You have the best jacket game
we both
of
said,
anybody.
I
As soon
was
as Kay logged, I was like, "Did you see his jacket? Red and white. It's unbelievable. I would look like such a clown in that, Terrell.
And you look amazing.
But thank you. It depends. But the thing about it is not about the clothes wearing you. It's about you wearing the clothes, and that's a very And so clothing is about how you present yourself to the world. But and the thing about it, and I'm happy you brought that up, because that goes back into the just the vibe here is I go about my day, and right outside this window right here, I'm in downtown Kiev. This is where I live, because I live here part-time and I live in Brooklyn part-time. So I go to both places when I'm not in Central Asia, Uzbekistan, for example. But I didn't plan on staying here that long. And when I bought this coat, which is custom made, I bought it during the pandemic. And so this is the first time I'm wearing it here in Ukraine. And I didn't have any idea that people would associate it with Santa Claus or Father Frost, which is over here in this region. And I'm taking photos every day. I mean, I take 5, sometimes I take 10 photos a day here. It just varies. And so, this holiday season just ended here, but the whole season, everything just went by with this anxiety, because again, this is people's homes. And when you watch media, I think some people are surprised when they see the videos that I capture of myself, because I also take video of myself running, going about my routine, because they think that the news cycle is these people's lives, and nothing could be further from the truth.
And what is the difference between, because obviously all of our news that we consume about Ukraine here comes from CNN, MSNBC, Reuters, Al Jazeera, different spots, the Associated Press, but almost all of them come at it from an American-centric perspective, where you look at it, how it affects America and how it affects the things that we do in our economy. What is the difference that you're seeing as far as news reporting that the Americans are not aware of, or they're not paying nearly enough attention to?
I think that's a good point. So first of all, here locally, everyone is focused on this military buildup across around the border, across the borders, and so locally people are paying attention to it for sure. I think the difference is that because people are looking at Ukraine through this Moscow lens often, because that's what the American media focuses on, because there are vast differences between Ukraine and Russia. And because they look at it through this Moscow lens, they don't understand the culture of Ukraine. And the best way that I describe it is to a lot of Americans within our racial context. We look at Ukraine and Russia, and you think, okay, these are just two white people kind of going at each other, and nothing, and it's just vastly different. I tell people you wouldn't do that no more than you would compare a Nigerian with a South African or an Ethiopian or a Senegalese person or a Congolese person, right? These places are very complex. And so the difference in storytelling that you see is that there's a lot of context that Ukrainians feel here that in regards, because they basically feel colonized. And so you see a lot of so a lot of the holes that we see in the American media aren't here, because these are, these people's lives. Mm-hmm. And I think what's also missing, and going back to the context of colonization, you see this dynamic of you also see this dynamic of fighting for media narratives. A few years ago, there are 3 television stations that were shut down, precisely because the government believed that they were pushing propaganda, and they were, right? And so keep in mind that because this country is colonized,
pushing Russian propaganda.
Yes.
Okay, silly question, but just
no, you're correct. No, it's good that you're asking, right? And so there are a number of channels here that were, they're accused of, hey, pushing Russian propaganda, and particularly language, right? And so what you have here is that you have to make a decision of, okay, our country has been under the political jurisdiction of the Russian Empire since Catherine the Great, right? Which is basically it's like the late 1700s, like 1783, 84. I don't want to don't quote me on the quote, but it's around it's like the 1780s that Catherine the Great took this country, into the jurisdiction of Russia. Well, basically they began, a Russification of it, basically meaning replacing Ukrainian with Russian, displacement, repopulation, all those things took place. And then also came with Crimea, right? Because Catherine the Great, they also came and conquered Crimea. And so people understand this context here. And so
it's very much almost like here we go again type thing.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. People, you have this history in you. And so when you see my tweets, I'm giving you the context of this history. And to give you a sneak peek of an article that I'm working on right now, where I explain this, there are, local journalists pay attention to what's happening in media in the United States. And so when you hear some people say, well, Putin has a point, that would be like telling Palestinians that Israel has a point. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So when you break it down like that, so it's like you are agreeing with a government that has this amount of, military might, like the force and military and political will is just proportionate. And so because maybe you don't understand the history of our country, you're ignorant, you're unwittingly giving this person a benefit of the doubt when they're just engaging in the continuation of the imperial project of Russia.
And this is a silly question. This is a Lance Corporal Kate in the smoke pit curious question. I know they've taken it over time and time again, but what's in it for them taking over Ukraine? Like, why do they want it? Like, why would they? Just people and resources? Like, what's the?
That's a good. No, you're asking, all your questions are good. It's a rational question that is not congruent with a rational thinking person in Putin, because it's irrational, right?
That's a great point. Putin just Putin's, honestly.
It's just Putin's mind, it's insanity.
Yeah.
But ultimately, here's what you have to keep in mind. Crimea, Donetsk, and Luhansk, the people live horribly there.
Yeah.
Right? They live horribly. And even before mind you, even before these occupations took place, people had a number of grievances with the Ukrainian government for a wide range of reasons. So did every other person around the country. for example. There could be grievances in America, but you wouldn't say Texas, you need to, Texas should succeed, or all these.
Some of us would. I mean, it's
listen,
ridiculous down here too.
I get your point, but we're going to stay focused. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
All
right, let's keep going.
We're going to stay focused, but I appreciate the levity. Okay, so, but the thing about it is that for Putin to invade, it's the way that an imperialist thinks, and that keep in mind that up until spring of last year, there's a poll that found that more than 80% of Russians supported the annexation of Crimea, and so there's a lot of people in Russia who support this because they too have this imperial framework, because they are in a country that was colonized. When you think about Siberia, the cold place in the east of Russia, that was not originally Russia. That was indigenous land. So if you look at this, the way I explain to people, which makes people kind of not know how to deal with me because they think I'm like this hawk that's going pro, NATO, etc. America is a settler colonial state, just like Russia is, right? And so America displaced indigenous communities. Russia did the same thing, right? So much of the land and territory that is now Russia was never there. It was taken through colonial conquest. And so when you think about the mentality of how a lot of Russians view Ukraine, it is through this imperial mindset, which explains why, I compare them to white people who are still grieving in the South because they lost the Confederacy. That's a pretty good analogy.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of Russians made America great again, like make Russia great again. Yes.
That is the framework. Now I'm going to tell you why you're not going to run into a lot of these conversations in mainstream. You're not going to run into it because, one, just as America has this preoccupation with banning critical race theory in schools, even though it's not in schools, right? Even so even though you have that dynamic, in Russia, there's a suppression and reinvention of history that's been led by Russian President Vladimir Putin. And also with Crimea, when the takeover took place, records, all history and documents were destroyed. And so there is this remaking of history that centers the Russian, which is ironic because the Soviet Union, which birthed Vladimir Putin, was a union of all peoples. We're supposed to be together. But if you talk to people here in Ukraine, they'll tell you essentially, we felt like, in many respects, you had a few people who were exceptionally at the top of the poll, but there's this conversation, the way that Putin talks about Ukrainians is ultimately the equivalent of white trash, right? And Georgia, if you go to the Caucasus, people will tell you that when I went to study in Moscow, I was treated like a dog. And so this equality that they talked about never existed. And so the frameworks in media aren't, that are missing is this colonial context. But because this field has been so resistant to having the conversations about race, like any other, the Russian, East European, Eurasian studies field, just like the rest of America, we're losing a lot of the key context to help us understand the motivations of people, because just like racism, it's irrational.
Right.
Okay. It's irrational. And that's the same thing that's happening with Putin and their treatment to Ukrainians.
Yeah, it's fine. I always leave out, I always assume there's a reason for the reason somebody did it. And I'm like, oh yeah, Putin's nuts.
It's because you're a piece of shit.
Putin sucks. That's
the reason.
That's the way that people describe it.
Yeah. A final question for me, just out of curiosity, I haven't traveled much besides, thank you, military, to the Middle East a couple of times.
Where'd you go? Tell me where'd you go?
Afghanistan. Went to Afghanistan.
Thank you for your service. Both my parents. Thank you. I mean, I know, but I'm not saying it because woo military. It's just that both my parents served. So my mother, my mother served, and so she did 23 years.
Oh wow!
And she did 23 years, and she was in the first. Now she's obviously older than you. She did the first Iraq War.
Wow! Yeah.
And she did Bosnia. After the NATO strikes.
Yep.
Right, and so she did a number of things, but I focus primarily on nuclear weapons, non-proliferation. But I have an interest just generally in the military, and I said thank you because I know there were a lot of regardless of my critiques of the U.S. military and the military industrial complex, I understand and appreciate the sacrifices because it was a lot. And so even with my mother, I'm always it's just a reflex because I have I'm a military mom, like I get it.
Oh, we're having her on the show next. Actually, we have a lot to ask her
The
about.
whole Star family's coming on. Yeah.
But really, I'm mostly very unfamiliar with that part of the world. You've been going to Ukraine for years now, and you spend many months there out of the year. Can you just tell us, like, what are the things that you love about it? Like, what's the
what draws you to that area?
What draws you to that area? Yeah. What do you?
Yeah, thank you very much. So in the summer, I'm in the Carpathian Mountains, and we call them the Alps of Ukraine per se, even without the infrastructure and the cleanliness and the good roads and everything. But there's a very
who needs
gorgeous part. Yeah, who needs that, right? But it's a beautiful part of the country that I go to because it's relatively inexpensive, and it's a great place to study, and I enjoy the hiking, and so. You know, and then also too, it's relatively untouched by tourism, and so as opposed to going someplace in Western Europe, because the way I look at it is that everybody and their mama want to go to Western Europe, and it's just common. I want to go to some place that is different and create my own imprint there and my own influence, and so that is what I enjoy about traveling to this country, and also I enjoy Ukraine because of this colonial history, I feel like there are a lot of parallels that I can draw with being a Black American and cellular colonialism, what that looks like. And so I love just traveling in my Black body in this space and grappling with how oppression works and how the similarities flow with people who I originally thought in my American context were white, but when you go outside of your American context, and understand Ukrainians are their own ethnic group, just like, again, like I brought the example with Africa, right? Like it's helped me to really appreciate how complex race is from a global perspective and how it functions. And because of that, I've been able to really bring a new analysis to understanding this conflict in ways that we can better understand it. And I want, and that in return is bringing new research, that's bringing new perspectives to this field to help us to resolve problems. And that's what I love doing. I like it, but beyond the hiking and beyond, you know, I'm also starting a tourism business here. And obviously I'm not inviting people to come right now, but
unless you want a discount, I'm sure you get a big discount.
Yeah, a discount.
Let's get a discount. Yeah, but yeah, that's why we're going to wait in the fall, right, to the school town, and then have a clothing line that I'm starting here. So there are a lot of things that I'm doing. A lot of people think that I have a wife here, which I don't, which surprises a lot of folks because that's one of the main things that a lot of Western men.
Oh, if you have a secret wife there, there's definitely going to be a book made about you. Guy who moves from Brooklyn to Ukraine and moves all around
which I'm writing about this in my book about how I like this Ukrainian, the way this sex, because to be honest with you, like a lot of the male gaze that's put on Ukraine is very sexist. I mean, just putting it out there like that. But I write about it in my book. But just being a Black person looking at all these things is fascinating because a lot of times people don't know if I'm from the continent of Africa when they find out I'm from America. You know, like I run into a wide range of stereotypes, but the crux of it is that I feel like I share something with Ukrainian people, and because I do, and I explore this intellectual dynamic of conflict of what I experienced in America and how they experience it here, it really helps me to, like I said, bring a new perspective to this region about how to solve problems. I'm happy that I'm making it, and I'm making the difference, and I feel really good about that, which is why I continue to come and do this, and as well as enjoy the hiking and the other recreational stuff.
Yeah, so if you want to check out more of what Terrell's doing, make sure you check out his podcast. It's called Black Diplomats. It's unbelievable. I've listened to some of your Twitter spaces and learned several things about Ukraine and what's going on. Make sure you're following him. He's at Russian Star on Twitter. You can check all of his stuff out. Terrell, thank you so much, and we'd love to have you back again.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Hey, bring me on anytime. I enjoy it. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. All right, let's move on to save rounds and alibis. Nick, we'll start with you.
Save rounds, nothing much. Just again, that YouTube channel. Please subscribe. You're gonna hear from me every week. Thanks.
Thank you. A lot of you have subscribed, and we appreciate that. But keep doing it. If not, we're going to go through the roles and assign Firewatch if you don't do it. Kate, what do you got?
My saved round, I would say Jonathan Allen. I would have to talk about that for just a quick moment. I was not prepared, so I have to pull it up. And in the meantime, I'll just talk about my nipples again for a second.
So Jonathan Allen.
Here we go. I got it.
Oh, got it. Okay.
I got it.
All right.
So Jonathan Allen, he's a football player. For anybody who doesn't know, he took to Twitter and he was like, "Ask me anything." And this guy Nick Chappelle was like, not to be confused with Dave Chappelle, totally different first name.
Or
he said,
or a producer name.
Right. All different people, different combos of the names. He said, "You can have dinner with 3 people, dead or alive. Who are you inviting?" And Jonathan Allen said, "My granddad, love it. Michael Jackson, sure, why not? And Hitler." Okay. Honey, no. Nick replied, 2 of the 3, I understand. But
and you had legitimately nearly infinite names that you can draw from.
So many names, dead or alive, anyone in the whole world.
It wasn't like pick 3 people to eat dinner with, and one of them has to be a genocidal maniac. Like
right.
You didn't that wasn't a caveat to the question.
Nick replied, 2 of the 3, I understand, but please explain your grandfather. Why would the hell? Just kidding. He said, please explain Hitler. Why do you want to? Jonathan Allen replied, "He's a military genius, and I love military tactics. But I would love to ask Jonathan Allen to give me one military tactic. Like what in his mind is a military tactic?" But honestly,
wow, okay, you just kind of gatekeep military stuff there. That was essentially the same thing as, oh, you like 9 Inch Nails? Name all of their albums.
No, I would argue this though. If I tweeted out, I love military tactics, I would argue you to ask me if I knew one, because I wouldn't. Okay.
Yeah.
So pie off a doorway is about where I am. Anyway, I love military tactics, but honestly, I would want to pick his brain as to why he did what he did. I could tell you why. Hatred, being a
racism,
evil human, racism, pretty simple. I'm also assuming that the people I've chosen have to answer all my questions honestly. So Jonathan Allen's going to think of some questions nobody's ever thought of before to ask Hitler. And also, I just feel like if you just pause for 1 second and be like, maybe I just don't say that. Maybe I just don't want to have lunch with Hitler. Whatever.
And it's not like somebody like Jonathan Allen, top 5 NFL draft pick. Like this guy has been, he was a 5-star athlete going into Alabama. Like this dude has been around media training for a long time.
Yes.
Like you don't just pull out Hitler. Like I think that's the type of thing that you say where you're trying to attempt to be interesting. Like, oh, Hitler, wow, that was off the beat path type of thing. Don't. Like
I'm not saying
2 schools of thought. One, do,
it.
second, don't. Just don't. You don't need to.
Yeah, and I'm not saying like people were like out like blah blah blah. Like I don't think I think it was he made a goof. He was trying to be edgy and it failed big time. But I just think.
Do you want to talk about military tactics? I understand that's a passion for a lot of people. Maybe pick Eisenhower. I don't know.
Maybe pick Eisenhower. Also,
or Colin Powell, like somebody else.
He wasn't that great of a military genius. Truly.
No, he wasn't.
He really was not.
Spoiler
he lost.
Alert.
Spoiler alert.
In a big way, and killed himself because he lost in such an embarrassing fashion.
Weenie.
Yes, Nick.
I think he's like just the last person you'd ever pick. I'm trying to go in my head. Like, is there anyone really worse? Like Bin Laden? I still think Hitler's like the worst. Like
not a good time.
Don't write the name.
Hitler, Stalin, Mussolini. All of those should just be crossed off your list.
Yeah. And also too, like no good jokes, probably not a funny guy.
Awful mustache, looking like a perf.
Probably gross to watch him eat a little bit. Like when you watch an old person eat, sometimes you're like, oh, it's unsettling.
Like, this is fucked up. Yeah.
I don't want to see Hitler eat up close.
I don't want to see Hitler, period. I feel like that's
America.
A fair statement.
Yeah, there, we said it.
Yeah.
We don't want to see
very anti-Hitler podcast here.
We are, yeah.
Anything else, Kate?
No. Oh, I'm finally getting my fridge. If you're listening to this on a Friday, my fridge is supposed to be coming between noon and 4. It's been now 2 weeks with an infant with over 2 weeks.
How do you live near one of the largest cities in the world and it took 2 weeks to get a fridge?
It was supposed to come last Friday. The landlord texted me. It was like, oh no.
Where did they order it from? Alibaba?
I believe it's either Home Depot or Lowe's or
You
something.
can order like 7 fridges for $9 on Alibaba. It just takes like 8 months to get here.
To get there. But yeah, and it sucks. Like this old fridge had like an ice maker and water that we bought the purifier through and blah blah. And the next fridge has none of that shit. No ice maker, no water.
Oh,
no
they said you thought that you're getting fancy with all your frills. Not having an ice maker is barbaric.
Sucks,
Simply
dude. Or
barbaric.
water, no whatever. It sucks. It's supposed to be coming tomorrow. Which thank God, because temperatures now are above freezing again. We're in the 40s, so all my shit's going
when
bad.
Somebody said that to you on Twitter whenever you posted it that my fridge is coming, and then somebody was like, "Well, what about your groceries?" I was like, "Oh my God, man!"
If you don't get it tomorrow between 2 and 4, I think we go with merch fridge watch as opposed to fire watch. We're on fridge watch as a podcast together.
It's been stressful because I've been trying to I'm still pumping my tits and I can't keep it. I got
beyond stressful.
Tit
you don't have a refrigerator in your house.
You have the title, Nick. I think the title of this episode should be "Titties, Ukraine, Afghanistan, and Syria." I think that just should be
the headline. Anyway, sorry, it's just on my mind. It's been very stressful. I'm eating so much canned foods. I can feel the sodium rolling through my veins. My body today, I never crave healthy food. I woke up this morning and I was like, bitch, you need a vegetable that's not in a can.
Snort of broccoli. What you need to do. Oh, Kate, what about you going on Amazon, ordering some of the liver pills that the Liver King sells? You get some of those. You can just get the whole ancestral animal line of products and see how you feel. I'll even pay for it. If you do it for a month straight, I want to see how you feel on the Liver King diet after a month. Okay, not like actual liver, because I know you would never touch that. But would you touch you could take the pills, right? The supplements?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll take. Can I say Billy Football had a blog today about the Liver King? Did you see it, chaps? It's a top blog right now. I only scanned it really quick because I didn't fully understand. I need to go back and read it. I think he believes Liver King has been injecting his body with stuff that puffs your body up. Like those guys that make their balls enormous with the saline, something like that. Some sort of scandal going with the Liver King. You might want to check it out.
Oh yeah, because the Liver King says he's all natural.
Okay, dude, primals.
If you're natural, fucking Rick Rude was natural.
Exactly. So you might want to check that. There's something afoot. I have to go back and read it to know the facts.
Nick's ears perked up when I said my favorite juiced up wrestler of all time, besides Scott Steiner, obviously, Big Papa Pump, was this huge guy, enormous biceps, Lex Luger. If you grew up watching WCW and WWF like I did, you wanted to give Lex Luger a jump. No doubt about it.
The narcissist. When he came to WWF, he came to the ring with the mirrors. And he would just flex.
Oh, yeah. I imagine
flex.
It has to be so much more fun to be a wrestler if you're the heel. That has to be the best. I would never want to be the good guy.
We have a podcast if you ever want to go on it, Kate. You want to talk some wrestling?
If you're listening, wrestling, RASSLAN.
I want to talk some wrestling. I think the best move, finishing move, was Lex Luger too, because he had that titanium steel plate in his arm. And he would just forearm shiver somebody and kill him.
Well, I know the guy who books the talent. That'd be me. So
that'd be Nick.
Wow.
You guys have your hookup. Holler if you hear me.
Head on over, go to YouTube, ZBT, and then head over to wrestling.
Yeah, and then go over to Barstool Grown Up. Lots of stuff going on YouTube as well. We have these new shorts that are dropping there. So if you're not subscribed again, please do that, because we're putting a lot of effort into the YouTube. And also, I need all of the ZBT listeners to really pressure Kate into getting a PlayStation or an Xbox, because I think me and Kate need to start going live on some Call of Duty and teaching you fools like Jonathan Allen some actual military tactics and how to get through these spots.
Pat, do we have a gaming system?
Yeah.
What is it?
We have a Super Nintendo.
Oh, we have a Super Nintendo.
PS4.
Okay.
PS4.
Okay.
That's it. Can we do it that way?
Yeah, we can do it on PS4. We'll set it up.
PS4. We want to go. Can I go online?
No.
Oh, no. I don't know.
Of course.
Oh, we can. He was joking. Oh.
Okay, you thought it was serious.
Gobbledygoose.
No, I can't. Pat said no.
Ladies and gentlemen, Pat. He's also seen my tits.
Oh, yeah.
All right, we'll be back next week. Nope. What day is it?
Where are we?
Oh, we'll be back for a Valentine's Day special. Maybe we should do a military love. If you have a great military love story of how you met somebody in like early MOS school, or you got married and divorced real quick, we need to know those stories. Let's try to have a full episode of nothing but Valentine's love on Tuesday.
Oh, let's do a love you, hate you too. Like people do the love you, hate you lines. Like let's get people.
We need all those stories from Big Louie's. We need all those stories from what's the one outside of Jacksonville, North Carolina? Spinnaker? Fucking, what is it called?
Meat Spin.
Meat Spin. Exactly right. Marines love going to Meat Spin Gentlemen's Club. So make sure you check that out too. All right. Wait, hold on.
All right, boys, we're going to Meat Spin.
Hey there, devil dogs. When you go out to Meat Spin this weekend, make sure that those dicks are shaved. We're going to have an inspection, and we want to make sure that you're using that lawnmower 3.0 on those big old juicy cocks. Because if not, actually, we have the performance package 4.0 from Manscaped. It's everything that you need to make sure that your life is looking good and your cock is looking great. The number one product in the package is the Lawnmower 4.0. This electric trimmer is designed to trim hair on loose skin like those testicles if you're in a warm shower, not a cold one. And get this, the trimmer's advanced skin-safe technology reduces cuts and nicks on your delicate motherfucking balls. It even has 4000K LED spotlight, so you can shave anywhere your heart desires, to including your backyard.
Wait a minute, I want to shave my flaps in a cave, a dark cave. Can I do that?
Oh yeah, you can shave them flaps anywhere, Kate.
Because there's a light on it.
That's exactly right. Go to manscaped.com, use the promo code 0 to get 20% off and 100% off of your hair from your testicles, your nipples, or your pussy.
Yeah.
Get 20% off free shipping with a code at manscaped.com. We'll see you next time. Sound retreat.